This is WMNF Tampa. This is Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan, and we are listening to Tuesday Cafe. And I want to read you about some news before we get to our next guest. President Donald Trump has suggested he might temporarily exempt the auto industry from tariffs that he previously imposed on the auto sector. And Trump says that's in order to give car makers time to adjust their supply chains. The AP is reporting that meanwhile, the Trump administration has taken its next steps toward imposing more tariffs on key imports, launching investigations into imports of computer chips, chip making equipment, and pharmaceuticals. Also, ranchers hope that Donald Trump's tariffs boost will cause the demand for cattle, but some of them fear market uncertainty. The prices might be raised enough to give ranchers and others the incentives they need to expand their herds for the first time in decades, but doing that would take at least 2 years, so it's not clear if Trump's tariffs on most of the world besides China are high enough to make that worth the investment for cattle ranchers. Also, a Doge associate is made the acting head of foreign assistance at the State Department. That's according to U.S. official. The move by the Trump administration expands the power of advisor Elon Musk's government cutting team over the State Department. A senior U.S. official confirmed the new job for a man named Jeremy Lewin, who is an associate of the Department of Government Efficiency. He was earlier appointed to help finish dismantling the U.S. Agency for International Development, and the official was not authorized to speak publicly on a personnel matter and spoke on the condition of anonymity. Lewin's appointment gives Musk's team, which has worked with the Republican administration to help make deep cuts to government programs and services, it's one of its highest formal roles in the federal government. So that's some news about Doge and so forth. Also, I want to tell you about some other news and internationally before we get to our next guest. Another U.S. aircraft carrier is in the Mideast waters, and it's ahead of a second round of Iran-U.S. nuclear talks. It is operating in Mideast water. The talks are between Iran and the United States over Tehran's rapidly advancing nuclear program. That's according to satellite photos that were analyzed today by the Associated Press. The operation of the USS Carl Vinson and its strike group in the Arabian Sea comes as American officials repeatedly have linked the U.S.'s months-long campaign against the Houthis as a means to pressure Iran in the negotiations. Questions remain over where the weekend talks between the countries will be held, though Iran's supreme leader described the first round of negotiations as going well. And earlier today, the CENTCOM, which is based in Tampa at MacDill Air Force Base, tweeted out information about their attacks on Houthis, their air attacks on Houthi positions. And also, here's another story that I'm going to read from the AP. It says an Israeli airstrike hit the northern gate of the Kuwaiti field hospital in the Gaza Strip today, killing a medic and wounding 9 other people. All of those people that were wounded and the medic were patients and medics, according to a spokesperson for the hospital in the Muwasi area, where hundreds of thousands have sought shelter in sprawling tent camps. Well, again, this is Tuesday Cafe, and we're going to go now to our third guest of the hour. Joining us right now is Vicky, Vicky Tong is a member of the Tampa Bay Students for a Democratic Society. And on Friday, they're going to be part of the National Day of Action for Higher Education. Thank you so much for coming on Tuesday Cafe, Vicky. Hey, hi, Vicky. Looks like your internet, it might be frozen. Maybe if you turn off your video, that would help us to get a better audio connection. All right, we're going
Sure.
to,
Can you hear me?
oh, yes, now I can hear you.
Awesome. Sorry, I was having some Wi-Fi issues just now.
Okay, so I want to ask you about SDS. What is it?
Awesome. So, I am a member of Tampa Bay Students for a Democratic Society. So we are a student activist group who, we're a multi-issue group. So we rally around different campaigns. So one of our past campaigns was defending DEI on campus. And then we also had a Palestine campaign to demand disclosure and divestment of the University of South Florida. And currently, we are doing a Defend Free Speech for Palestine campaign in response to USF enacting all this political repression against our group.
All right, well, let's go through those sequentially. First of all, the DEI, when you say that, what do you mean and what kind of attacks are there on DEI in higher education?
So DEI, standing for diversity, equity, inclusion. We've seen numerous attacks under the DeSantis administration, with him like demanding to schools to get rid of their DEI offices, which back in 2023, I believe, USF did comply to and completely got rid of their DEI office, which um, is against student interests. But now under the Trump administration, we are seeing even more attacks against DEI and like attacks against like DEI courses and things like that um, all across all across the US.
Why is that something that would impact students?
Well, I would say that DEI is, something that students really stand for. We support like women's and gender studies. We support um, Africana studies, and all of those align with DEI and what DEI has to offer.
Another thing that this rally on Friday is to targeting is about ICE actions on campus. So, why are you concerned about ICE actions on campus, and what do we know about how universities are interacting with ICE?
Yeah, so currently what we know about ICE and USFPD is something that the Oracle published very recently about USFPD's intentions to sign on to the 287G task force. Um, and um, it puts international students at risk. It makes international students feel unsafe, when they are just trying to receive an education at the University of South Florida. Instead, they have to fear for their safety, fear of their visas being revoked and fear of being deported. So, that's why we are standing against ICE being on campus because, all students deserve to have an education without the fear of for their safety essentially.
What are the details of Friday's National Day of Action for Higher Education that your group's Tampa Bay Students for a Democratic Society are organizing a rally in Tampa? Tell us more about where it is and when.
So this event is taking place on 50th and Fowler. It's happening um, April 17th at 4:30 p.m. And it's of a National Day of Action for Higher Education. So National SDS, which is the national group that we are a part of, joined a coalition of other groups. It includes Jewish Voices for Peace and many other groups. All uniting on defending higher education.
And you said the 17th. Is it the 18th this Friday?
Yeah, it's on the 18th. But technically the National Day of Action's on the 17th.
I see. All right, thanks so much. But this Friday at 4:30 at the corner of 50th and Fowler, that's kind of across Fowler Avenue from one of the main entrances of the University of South Florida. What can people expect to see there?
So we'll have a numerous speeches, all discussing our demands that are listed on our flyer. So, speeches talking about Trump's attacks on higher education, speeches talking about DEI, and also speeches talking about demanding free speech for Palestine.
And when you say free speech for Palestine, that's kind of a direct reference to what happened at the USF campus last year when there were students kind of occupying a public space on campus. Describe to people what happened.
So on starting April 29th, Tampa Bay SDS took on the national call to, demand that universities disclose their investments and divest their investments from, weapons manufacturing companies that are directly involved in the genocide of Palestinians in Gaza. Um, so Tampa Bay SDS, along with numerous other students and community members, um, occupied MLK Plaza to, demand all of these things. And the University of South Florida continue to try and push us off, try and demand that we leave, despite the fact that it is a public space. So on day one, three people were arrested, very swiftly and very suddenly and very violently. So Tampa Bay SDS and everybody came back April 30th, to continue to demand these things on a public space. South Florida decided to, um, involve 6 police jurisdictions and riot cops to violently shut down this protest that we had. And it also involved in 10 additional students and community members being arrested. South Florida still hasn't met with students to discuss these demands.
And some people were either expelled from school or got lost their degree programs. So, what do we know about how some of those cases turned out?
Yeah, so Victoria is one of the Tampa Bay SDS members that had their um, that was expelled and barred from obtaining her degree. She's still expelled and still not allowed to earn her degree, even though that she was one class away from graduating, or I think one assignment away from graduating. And then Joseph Shari, who was an international student at the University of South Florida, um, was suspended despite the fact that university administrators knew that he was an international student and being suspended would put his student visa at risk. But USF still decided to suspend him anyways, and that resulted in his student visa being revoked, and that resulted in him being deported.
So this is kind of a combination between your issues about immigration and ICE and also free speech and protests on campus. I also noticed that SDS is involved, and you may or may not know about this one, but there's another event that's happening this Saturday that SDS is part of. It's at noon at the Cypress Point Park in Tampa, and it's called "Bring Them Back: Protests ICE Kidnappings." Is that something that you can tell people about what's happening there?
So we're not the main organizers for that. We're organizing with a group of other community groups, but yeah, it's along the same lines of our demands for um, ICE to stop you know abducting people off the streets and deporting them.
And I think that that is the information that I have about where that is and so forth is that it's at Cypress Point Park in Tampa, happening Saturday at noon. There's Let me read this information about another school, another university, and maybe have you relate what's happening here at Harvard to what's going on at USF, and maybe that might be contributing to why the university is kind of not really paying attention to the student demands here. So, for example, the AP is reporting that the federal government says it's freezing more than $2.2 billion in grants and contracts to Harvard University. The institution said yesterday that it will not comply with a list of demands from the Trump administration as part of its campaign against anti-Semitism. The list at Harvard was updated last week, and it includes government and leadership reforms, as well as requirement to institute what it calls a merit-based admissions and hiring policy. The Trump demands also include an audit of the student body and faculty on their views about diversity, as well as a ban on face masks that appears to target pro-Palestinian protesters. So you have the Trump administration essentially going to a university and saying, institute all of these reforms that we think are necessary at your school, or else we're going to freeze $2.2 billion in grants and contracts to Harvard. Harvard seems to be pushing back a little bit here, but how would you compare what's happening at Harvard versus what's happening at USF?
I would say that USF definitely complies a lot more with, these like attacks on DEI, these demands of the Trump administration. USF doesn't resist against any of these, as I previously mentioned, like getting rid of the DEI office completely. But yeah, I think it just goes to show that like the Trump administration, um, feels extremely threatened by the student movement, and that's why he's threatening all these schools with their like federal funding freezes, and why he's targeting such like prevalent leaders of the pro-Palestine movements that occurred spring of 2024.
Our guest is Vicky Tong, a member of Tampa Bay Students for a Democratic Society, and you're listening to Tuesday Cafe. She's talking about the National Day of Action for Higher Education, and we are going to take a phone call in a second. Let me see if I can get Scott on the air. In just a second, we're going to put Scott on the air, but in the meantime, we can ask you about the have you what's the mood among fellow students about the idea that ICE, the government group ICE, might be able to be cooperating with the police on the university campus?
Honestly, the majority of students, disagree with USFPD collaborating with ICE, and with a significant portion of USF campus being international students, um, it directly goes against, the USF student body, quite frankly, because international students make up such a significant portion.
I want to remind people that we're listening to Tuesday Cafe, and our guest is Vicky Tong, a member of Tampa Bay Students for a Democratic Society. Their National Day of Action for Higher Education is this Friday afternoon. There's a demonstration at 4:30 in the afternoon. It's at the corner of 50th and Fowler. And the rally is part of the National Day of Action for Higher Education to defend DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, to demand free speech for Palestine, and to demand a stop to Trump's attacks on higher education. And we've talked about those things here. And specifically, the USF group here is also responding to the USF police recently signing a contract to collaborate with Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. Uh, s- I think you've talked to the administration about some of these issues. When you talk to them, what's their response?
So last year, shortly before encampments, Tampa Bay SDS did deliver a petition that had numerous student groups signed on to it, demanding that USF protect diversity, equity, and inclusion, protect women and gender studies, and protecting Africana studies. And this letter was directly delivered to Danielle McDonald, the Dean of Students. And she did receive the petition, but never followed up with any of the students, and never, had a conversation with the students regarding these demands.
Well, I want to thank you very much for coming on WMNF's Tuesday Cafe today, Vicky.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate you coming on. Vicky Tong is a member of Tampa Bay Students for a Democratic Society, and Friday is their National Day of Action for Higher Education. They're going to be demonstrating at 4:30. It's at the corner of 50th and Fowler in Tampa, near the entrance to the University of South Florida. I also want to thank our earlier guests, Desiree Lynn and Corey Weckerly. And if you missed any of this show, you can watch it again starting in about an hour or so on WMNF.org. This has been WMNF's Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan.